Hello and welcome back, and before we start today's video, yes that's right, we've got to do our normal disclaimer, which is this device is a router. That's right, router. Say it with me, router. Okay, so before you go into the comment and slam me for the pronunciation, remember, we all live in the world, people say things differently, and to be perfectly frank, if you do think this should be pronounced router, which I disagree with you, but okay, this device is a router to me, and I'm going to be calling it router throughout this video, so if you do have a problem with that, and given that the word is starting to lose all meaning to me right now, let me know in the comments, but don't go clicking dislike because of the way someone pronounces a word. Yes, that's right, we are looking at the D-Link EXO. It's a router that I have already kind of talked about a little bit in other videos, and finally we've got one here in the studio. A little while later than I would have liked, but of course there are shortages everywhere. This is another one of the D-Link Wi-Fi 6 enabled routers. I actually have a wide range of them currently available, some supporting mesh, some supporting low-level business use, some of them more for the gamers and enterprise level users out there, and this is one of their devices that's very much about the transmission of data in a big way. It's taken advantage of a multitude of antennas, 6 of them in total, and this device is actually not too egregiously priced. It's knocking around, at least in the UK, for about 170 odd nicker. In the US it knocks around for a little bit more, obviously because of the currency, at around $230. And this device, the X5400, is a kind of a heavy 5 gigahertz supporting Wi-Fi 6 router for gamers. Now, a number of you watching this video, this may be the first time you're looking at actually purchasing a prosumer or premium router. So many of us rely for home or business on the router that is included with the package with our internet service provider, our ISP. But these devices always kind of have cutbacks in a number of ways, and although a lot of us do not have the internet connectivity running into our home or business to fully take advantage of greater than 100 megabytes per second connections, it's worth highlighting that within your network you want to have as much control and as much flexibility, security, and of course performance and throughput as possible, and that's very much where this router is designed to thrive. Now, one router that I'm going to refer to a lot during this video is this one here, while I point right while looking at the camera. Now this one behind me is the RT92AX. Now this is from Asus. It was one of the best router reviews that I made in the last 18 months. I was so impressed with this device. It wasn't perfect, but for the money you were paying and what you were getting for your money, for me, it was one of the best Wi-Fi 6 routers I reviewed of that period. And as time has worn on, that was more than a year ago, things have changed a great deal. And now there are so many Wi-Fi 6 routers on the market, with this one being the latest challenger as of a few months ago. Now, let's talk about what you get for your money. Inside here, we've got this router. It is a 6 antenna router with a 4x4 5 gigahertz frequency coverage. That allows up to 480 megabytes per second of potential bandwidth there. Now remember, they generally measure it in megabits, so it'll be 4,800, but again I'm going to focus on megabytes for the big chunky data out there. There is a 2.4 gigahertz frequency as well for older devices or devices that don't take advantage of 5 gigahertz because they're much smaller or more efficient, and there is a 2x2 there available. Again, that supports around 50 to 57 megabytes there. They list at 574 megabytes per second there on that frequency. It is a multi-gigabit connected device there. Unfortunately, it does not have 2.5 GBE on board, which unfortunately is something I'm going to mark this device down from very early doors. Generally, if it lives up to the specifications it's going to say, and later in the video we're doing a software review, I hope to be pleased with this. I think they found a good price point there. I think the price is just about right for what you're getting there. There are routers out there in the market that arguably are more aggressive, but again they are priced at the 250, 350 and even 400 pounds. This on the other hand, which is incredibly light for a start. That's one of the first things I've noticed. It feels like it weighs nothing. It removes that plastic there. Have that looking. And one of the first things that's striking me, other than the incredibly large number of antennas, is that passive cooling there on the front. Look how much ventilation this has. Obviously, most routers rarely have a fan inside, so they deal with a lot of heat sinks inside and a lot of very efficient components internally. With this device, clearly prioritizing a lot of that efficient cooling with the air pass through there. Now, I mentioned 6 antennas. We've got 4 there. It's absolutely huge. It's wall mountable as well, which is quite impressive. We've also got 2 further antennas inside. We've got a quick start installation guide, information on our 2-year warranty. LAN cable there, again that's a Cat5e cable, and we've got our UK mains cable, but again it's an adaptable, so there's your worldwide support. And again, as mentioned in other videos, why do routers always arrive in this corrugated packing? I've never understood it. Even when brands that don't traditionally release routers release their own router system, they always use that corrugated packing. It's kind of like a universal thing. Maybe it's a factory thing, but so having a look at the chassis design there, again, it's plastic all the way around. We've got LED markers there on the base, and again, it's a nice angular display as well, which again means if you are going to wall mount this, then chances are that's going to be quite handy there as well. There's no configurable buttons there that I can see there on the front. They are LEDs that denote power, network connectivity, the 2.4 gigahertz frequency, the 5 gigahertz frequency, and USB connectivity. That is right. This device also arrives with USB ports there for network file sharing. If we have a look at those rear ports there, let's go through them together. So we've got our mains power there, of course. We also have the reset key, which is unsurprising. We've also got a WPS button. This device does support WPA3 security, by the way. We will talk a little bit more about the software capabilities of this device shortly. We've got USB 2 and USB 3 there. Again, generally, these are only ever going to be used for file index storage. It'll be interesting to see how the system portrays that, whether it's going to do that kind of breadcrumb file management there, or the application, or even the desktop access. This does have mobile access configuration with D-Link's own app, but you can also completely configure and set it up and interact with it via your web browser, which is becoming increasingly rare these days, by the way, for a router, with most routers taking the arguably easy route and only allowing you to configure with a mobile device that at least maintains access via the web browser as well, which I think is always much easier to maintain and control. We've got 4 1GBE LAN ports there, and of course a WAN port, which can also be used for LAN connectivity if you want to go for a closed network system. Again, I like the USB ports. I kind of wish they were usable for more than just storage. I will be trying out, probably outside of the review, some multi-gigabit adapters to see if it's possible for it to interact or utilize those in a firmware update. And another complaint I have about the LAN ports there, even though it's, you know, a 5 RJ45, all of them being gigabit router that's Wi-Fi 6 with that many antennas for that price is still very impressive. In 2021, I kind of hoped we'd see 2.5 GBE at this point, whether you're going to be connecting that to like a NAS or another device, or because we are starting to see greater than 1 gigabit internet out there in the environment of the world. We're seeing it in larger parts of Europe. We're definitely seeing it in parts of the US, and of course in the East, absolutely loads of places have greater than gigabit internet there, where I think 2.5 GBE would have been very, very useful and welcomed quite readily. Yes, it's still rare, and it is increasing the price of routers substantially, where some of them are cracking into the £500 bracket, but at the same time, if you're going to go to the trouble of embracing Wi-Fi 6 or even Wi-Fi 6E in the near future, I'm surprised they didn't at least factor in a 2.5 GBE version down the line. Let's remove that plastic there. Now, as mentioned, the device has all those Ethernet ports. It doesn't support link aggregation, which again isn't hugely unsurprising. Very few routers actually support that. They've got failover in some cases or duplicating port connectivity, but you can't really have port trunking or link aggregation on routers that much. Generally, you only find that in switches or combined ones where you have a greater than gigabit Ethernet port where link aggregation can then be taken advantage of. Again, Wi-Fi 6 isn't new. Wi-Fi 6 has now been commercially available for at least close to 3 years, and although very few ISPs are embracing it, most hardware client manufacturers, from mobile phones to tablets to laptops to PCs, have all started embracing Wi-Fi 6, and maybe you should too. But I wouldn't wait for an ISP to include Wi-Fi 6, largely because a lot of them when they kind of release their routers, they're very affordable mass production models that have very limited abilities built into them. So although I'm not a big fan of its lack of 2.5 GBE and the lack of link aggregation, and I should mention also this doesn't support embracing of mesh with an existing mesh system, I think for a Wi-Fi 6 router that's got 6 antennas built into it, and it's got a wide array of connectivity as it stands, I think for 170 odd pounds these days, this is actually quite a lot for what you're getting. Now, in terms of software capabilities, let's talk a little bit about what this can do. We will be going into the software and taking a closer look at that, but overall, for what you're getting for your money, it has all of the features, and there's a few that stand out more than others. Obviously, as mentioned, it takes advantage of WPA3 security. On top of that, you've got the standard stuff like quality of service protection, DDoS attacks, that sort of thing. But there's also very unique system advantages, such as BSS colouring, where if you do have multiple Wi-Fi bandwidth in a single home or business environment, it changes the profile of them, hence that colouring, where it can pass through them and be identified a lot more readily in a Wi-Fi 6 environment than traditional bandwidth coverage. So again, not really a feature a lot of people talk about, but it's a lot more useful than people give it credit for, because you just turn on your Wi-Fi and scan. You wouldn't believe how many Wi-Fi bandwidth are in any even small location there. There's also OFDMA enhanced packet handling, which again is moderately part of Wi-Fi 6, but still the fact that it's included along with the applications and definitely the speed test stuff. I should really talk about the Ookla speed test is engaged inside. Generally, when you're trying to speed test your environment, only Asus and D-Link have really gone to the trouble, and TP-Link in some of their newer releases have included speed test software inside their systems that allow you at the ready click of a button to bench test your connectivity. Now, a lot of us are very black and white about internet connectivity. You either have it or you don't. A lot of people don't really think about the grey area in between. And although you can just do a kind of manual transfer of data, I think a lot of people like having a one-touch speed test, which is a remote server. Not just any old server, but when you have one, like when you go into, if you want to try this afterwards, open up another tab and type the word speed test. Google has one built into its browser, but then you're already working through another client to do that. The idea that you can interface with the router direct to do the speed test with the wider internet is very, very useful and give you some idea about the health of your network and internet connection when some devices aren't working and you have to kind of troubleshoot all of your devices to find out where the bottleneck of the problem is. It is so much easier when you can eliminate any kind of issue with the router and the wider internet connection straight off the bat within literal seconds. Now, the support of MIMO, multi-input, multi-output handling there, and of course Wi-Fi 6 with its lower power utilization on client devices is always going to be beneficial in Wi-Fi 6, but you can't really give them credit for that. One thing I will give them credit for is automated firmware updates, something that is becoming increasingly necessary in this age of ransomware and malware and stuff like that. You don't want to have to manually update your firmware regularly. You want the device to do it itself, because let's face it, this is a router in your home or business. It's as important now in its security level as the door and the keys. It is an entry point now to you and your data. So the idea that you can be out of whack for a day or two on firmware is actually a lot worse than you think, as vulnerabilities are found, because let's face it, they can only be literally one step, and not literally, figuratively, one step ahead of people trying to get into your home or business. Now, there is AI assistant support in the likes of Google Home and Alexa and stuff like that, so you can make voice requests to the system to do certain things, and it can pass through to other smart home devices as well, which is going to be handy. The extent to which that's supported I will check for when we do the software portion of stuff. Now we've got this out. One thing I will also touch on is the parental control support on this. A lot of router providers, and this is a constant, by the way, this is something I think a lot of companies fall foul of. Parental controls on these devices come into two major categories. There's the ones where they go, yeah, our device supports parental control, but what it is a subscription-based service, and you have terrible controls which they then go, but if you get the monthly premium £5 to £10 a month, you'll be safe for you and your family, which feels a little bit blackmaily. And the other one is the one where they include all the parental controls. Now, for all intents and purposes, from what I've seen while preparing for this video, this has the second one, the one where all of the parental controls are inclusive with client control and device management. But, of course, we will know more in the software overview. So for now, we've had a look at the device. We've talked about what it can do physically. Let's have a look at that software. Let's set this up and go through a lot of the software to see if the D-Link EXO should be the router for you. Let's flick our way to the screen. Right, so here we are on the user interface of the router, the EX5460, and as you can see on the left-hand side of the screen here, we have the desktop here being logged in via the web browser interface here, and on the right-hand side of the screen, we've got the mobile app. Now, we're going to come back to the mobile app a little later on, but I wanted to put them both on screen so you can see a little detail there about how they differ in terms of what they do and how they present information. A number of people always, particularly tech guys, will pick the desktop user interface because although it's not quite as pretty and graphical as the mobile one on the right, it still gives you a lot of input in terms of how you enter information with the keyboard and mouse and stuff like that, and how much information is displayed on screen. And what I'm trying to emulate here and demonstrate, I should say, is simply that both of them do indeed show off all the information you're going to need. And I think it's important that router makers don't just push towards mobile. They need to make sure that both mobile and desktop is catered for in terms of users. Now, I won't say that the D-Link software is going to win any awards in prettiness in terms of web browser stuff. It looks much better as the mobile app, but overall, it's still, you know, quite restrained and a little dated there on the desktop there of the web client. But again, it is still very usable. So you can see here a little topographical layout of all the devices here. If we go in, we can find out more information about the connection there that we've got. We can find out more about the two clients, the phone and the desktop, that are connected now. And we can manually create clients if we choose. But what's particularly interesting is we can edit a lot of the information about them. So we can name them, we can say whether we want parental control, that will go through later on. We can also reserve the IP to make sure it never loses that place on the network for later on if we want to do stuff with it. Now, if we carry on moving forward, there's a USB device there. I've connected a USB drive, and on that USB drive, I have enabled all of the multimedia settings. So what that means is that this USB drive can then be made available on the local area network. So you can connect to it here if you choose via the web browser using its own IP, because it will be assigned an IP once you enable it as an FTP server. And again, the settings for that are here, which we will look at later on. But if you are using, for example, a Windows machine, you can go into the computer settings, select computer, go into access media server, and then from there you can find the media server on your local area network, and from there you can connect to it and then set up all of the things you need to do moving forward. So again, I've not enabled all of those settings, that's why it didn't appear, and I will go through that with you in just a moment. But for now, those are kind of the big key topographical settings there. And of course, if you are using a mesh, using extenders, that is something you can expand into there. And again, I know I mentioned it earlier in the review about support for mesh not being fantastic on this. Again, it's actually a great deal better than I gave it credit for. And again, we can pause internet access for clients if we choose at the touch of a button for a security protocol. And if we go into the settings menus here at the top, we can go through some of the different things we can control. So in the internet settings here, we can find out more information about the presets that we go for. We can even create a virtual LAN, which is quite cool as well, something you largely normally associate with switches. And you can enable these virtual LAN settings quite quickly and assign different devices to that VLAN based on physical connections as well if you choose. If we carry on and go into the wireless internet settings, we can see that all of the individual options are there. We can change everything from the security protocols if we choose quite quickly on the fly, all the way through to WPA3 or just none whatsoever. And we can enable a lot of the protective protocols as well as changing the password and the name on the fly. We've also got the option to create a guest mode for people that are, staying at your home or in your business, so they have a sub-internet connection that you can rename if you choose. and therefore you can choose whether they have internet access, network access, one or both, which is quite cool when you've got maybe surveillance or NASes or other devices where you want a guest to be able to access the internet but not access other devices on the local area network. Now, if we carry on and make our way down to the network settings, come out of it there, we can change a lot of those settings again too, allowing us to play with a lot of those different server settings, and particularly ones with file sharing between devices on the network. Carrying on, we can go into the USB sharing, and as you can see, I've already enabled a lot of those server settings there that allow us to create access to files on USB, either via the web browser or via connected client devices. And we can even create extra users and change the amount of access and control they have, whether they can access that FTP server, whether they can only read to it or enable and interact with it, and if they've got access to the VPN if you assign one. Now again, all of these options are available on the mobile browser, as you can see there. And again, one of the things that was talked about quite a lot early doors on this setting and on this router, and they do make a big shout about this on this router's own livery of the box, is that speed test. So if we enable the speed test here on the mobile app there in the background, I can make my way into the management panel, go into the statistics area, and then from here, that real-time information of my phone there running the speed test. Remember, this is the speed test from within the router, not my phone. This is that internet packet test happening right now there on screen. And it's quite nice to have that level of kind of back and forth control on this, and how those statistics are being recorded in real time there, which is quite nice there on the web browser while we're running that performance benchmark there on the mobile, which once it concludes in a moment will give us that Ookla speed test. And again, remember, this is not the speed test from the mobile, this is just the speed test being reported from the router to the internet there, which is just about to conclude, and it'll give us some real-time statistics there on the right-hand side of the screen, because the test has ended, as you can see, from the packet data being displayed there on screen. And there, the mobile there has displayed what we've got running there, utilizing that speed test there, that it's a good internet connection. We can even find out a little bit more information about it there. All the upload and download are all displayed there on screen. So again, lots of options there. We can even link with dCloud services, where if you are using network appliances from D-Link, you can actually create a large cluster of D-Link devices that can all be micromanaged remotely. Again, if you're going to open up a feature like this, make sure you stay on top of your port forwarding and stuff like that. But again, lots of stuff. You even, have got different ways in which you can interact with this device on your network. Now, with your internet. Now, in my case, I've connected this router to my standard router that I use in this environment. So, although this displays internet, the router, and my client device, really I'm connecting to another router. I'm just connected that router that I utilize for my own needs into the WAN port of this D-Link router. But you can, if you choose, use the extension mode, where you can use that extender mode to bounce off an existing router wirelessly, which can be useful. But again, this isn't quite the same as utilizing mesh connectivity, and overall I would still recommend mesh over this. Now, if we go into the features, we can have a little look at that parental control. Parental control will allow us to create profiles where we can choose different websites that are supported in different devices. So say we give ourselves a profile name now. We'll call this one testing. With this one, we want this to be on a schedule. This schedule is going to be these times of day, if we choose. Let's select them there. Select right now. We can say whether we want a bedtime schedule, so it can basically set a time to disconnect a certain device from the internet. So we can say what days of the week and the bedtime schedule there if we choose. So again, we'll say that on Wednesday, and then from there we can create a website filter. So let's give this one a filter. We'll go with this one with Facebook. We'll call this one Facebook. And again, now we're blocking Facebook, and then we select a device. So in this case, this desktop. And that's it. It's that straightforward. I've now created a setup where you won't get the internet on a Wednesday at night. I've set up a schedule that only allows internet connectivity during the middle of the day on 3 days, and it bans Facebook from this laptop device. It's that straightforward and easy to create those parental controls. It's not going to win any awards for its appealing graphics, but it's still going to give us that information. And again, those parental controls are available there on the mobile phone desktop there. And again, although the settings are presented in a slightly easy way, in a step-by-step there, so we can just go ahead and add things one by one. Personally, I'm still going to prefer that of the desktop settings menu there. Quality of service engines allow us, if we choose, to select different devices have a priority on our network. So with the priority of service, first we can run that speed test on the browser if we choose there. We're not going to do that again. But what we can do with connected clients is say this desktop has the highest priority, and that highest priority, we set a preset there that means that device in the highest priority must always have the lion's share, and it must have a dedicated pathway of that. And then we can assign different priorities to the other devices on our network as and when they get connected. If we move along, we can look into firewall settings there, and from the firewall we can enable all manner of settings to open up ports, close ports, and more, all of them very, very easily. And that leads us neatly into port forwarding, which once again, we can then create those different ports analysis. So we can even assign ports to be open to only preset devices, which is quite handy and on a schedule. So if you're a gamer that wants to access a private remote server, this is a great way to do that without leveraging your security too much. Again, there's all of the standard stuff from static route control to dynamic DNS, which allows you to kind of change, have more flexible identities to certain connections on your router. And again, you can assign VPNs to your existing router setup quite easily. You will need to download your profiles for those from their respective sites. Now, again, a lot of management settings there. Some of these are going to be a bit boring and predictable, but again, scheduled power on, power off is all available there. No one's really going to use that. System logs for when the system's being accessed and what's happening. And again, you can have those sent via email. Same goes with notifications as well to give you real-time information about your router and its health. The system admin account, which you've already got created, we can change a lot of those settings and make sure that we keep it as secure as possible. User control allows us to add further controls. Again, either individual users will have access to the VPN, to the FTP server if we enable it, and more. And again, moving down, updates to the system firmware can be done automatically, or you can make sure you do them manually. Again, I strongly recommend automatic updates. And again, that's really it. We've already looked at statistics. So again, there's a lot of decent settings there to play with. They're not presented in the, craziest, sexiest way, but they're still nice. Now, on the mobile side of things, on the right-hand side of the screen, things are pretty much the same. They're just presented in, kind of a slightly more intuitive, if somewhat limited fashion. So again, if we've got multiple devices on our network, and again, that can be from router points, mini network shared drives and more, we can find out lots of real-time information about the devices that are connecting, and if we want to block certain devices that have arrived on network. Now, if we go to the bottom of the screen there, we can find out more information about allowing people to connect to the Wi-Fi with just using a 3D barcode, or again, that pausing there because I'm utilizing this admin tool. Again, we can play with lots of these settings if we choose, and lots of them just allow you to have a greater area of control over your home or business network and internet. It's just not as, for me, as visible on screen as it is there on the top of the screen for you guys showing the desktop. Now, in the guest Wi-Fi, all of the settings are kind of the same, but I feel like that is an area where you'd be more inclined to find easy settings. And the same goes with those clients as mentioned. The parental controls are more of a step-by-step thing, which is nice that we've got these two different ways of doing it, but still nonetheless, I'm always going to prefer the desktop. All of these settings largely the same as those of which we've seen, the only main difference being that when we look at them here, we see them in a much more modern stance, and they have to be a lot more pop. And the same thing goes, as you see, if you want to utilize the smart home and voice activation stuff, you're going to have to create that D-Link account in order to give instruction and manage the device via mobile means. But overall, this is a good router. It's not going to blow anyone away. I think there's a reason it's priced the way it's priced. I think this device, let's run another speed test for the hell of it. This device isn't one that is designed to break the mold right now. It is designed largely around the idea that you want to have a secure set up and forget network environment that takes advantage of Wi-Fi 6. Yes, I wish it had greater than 1 gigabit Ethernet connectivity. I think that's a real shame, particularly with its enormous bandwidth support across all of those, a large 4x4, 5 gigahertz range there. That's a huge amount of coverage at 480 megabytes. So short of that, and I have been corrected there on mesh, the software may seem a little underwhelming, but I think right now, no one could have watched this video and thought, that looks complex. There have been times, of course, when you've been watching this and you've looked at me looking at some of the network protocols there, and maybe you've thought, oh, that seems a little tough to go by. But I would disagree. I would say if you're looking at these areas, you know what you're doing to start with, and everything else was intuitive and as user-friendly as you would like. And if you're looking for a router that you can use to upgrade your home or business to Wi-Fi 6, and you don't really want to have a headache or a steep learning curve, you could do a lot worse than this device. Then you have how this router compares to that of my traditional AC router here in my home from my internet service provider. Now on the right hand side of the screen, I've gone to the trouble of performing 3 quick checks on my internet service provider router using Ookla, utilizing Google Speed Test, and utilizing fast.com. So all 3 of these we're now going to test on the left hand side of the screen. So let's get speed test up, and from there we can go ahead and first get that Ookla speed test up there on screen. So let's get the Google one done first. So again, we are comparing the Google speed test here. So straight away already it's just managing to eke over that 100 megabits there. And again, remember, this is exactly the same proximity. Both my ISP router and the D-Link router are connected with a 1 meter long Cat6 cable connected with the same distance from this router that I'm connecting to. So again, we'll do that same thing again, and this time we will go ahead with that speed test there, and we're going to go with the Ookla speed test. Let's go there. So from this on, we'll make sure we're utilizing exactly the same server. We want to make sure we use the Horsham server. So again, we scroll down and let's find Horsham there. Horsham, boom, and then we test it again. So remember, all of these tests are running side by side, and this is just to show you that with this Wi-Fi 6 router, it is garnered not a huge amount. Let's be realistic, it's not a massive amount of difference between them, because I am still utilizing this device connected, and there is of course the bottleneck between them once you connect these 2 router devices. But even very early doors, utilizing this router is already giving my laptop a clearer, straighter run, although the upload on that is fractionally lower. We're seeing it connecting. Are we going to get any higher there just before the end of that test, before we move on to the fast.com test? Yeah, we're eking into that 10 megabits there, but it was still higher by just a few margins there. And of course, we can make our way onto the last test there on speed.com and see how these 2 compare. And again, we are exceeding that speed there. This has opened up a level of performance on this router over that of my ISP router on the right hand side of the screen. And for me, this is the biggest tell of what we want to see here. Now, if I was using a gigabit connection, then chances are I would still see these numbers going even higher. But nonetheless, for me, this is just another proof in the pudding about where you can eke extras from your internet service provider if you're utilizing a router and not their included one to get more out of it. And once you start moving into that territory where your internet connection can, oh no, we've lost connection with it there, it's disconnected because we ran out of time. But nonetheless, this has been my tests and review of this router. And for me personally, I'm quite pleased with it. I would definitely recommend this router. I think although the user interface is a little drab, and although it doesn't have that 2.5 GBE connection, I think there's enough here to show that this is still a great router. And given that price of £160, £170 right now, I'm quite pleased with this Wi-Fi 6 router with all manner of antennae and coverage. If you've got multiple Wi-Fi 6 devices in your home or business, you're going to get the most out of it here. If you've enjoyed this video, click like. If you want to learn more about routers or this router and more, click subscribe. We cover all things network and data. Take advantage of the free advice section over on NAS Compares. And other than that, I will see you next time.